Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Vanchakalpataruvascha Kripasindavevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. We're going to continue our reading from the Sri Caitanya Charitamrta, because as far as I can tell, nobody can stop us. We demand our freedom. We demand the freedom to read whatever Shastra we want for as long as we want. We demand that everybody in the world be given the opportunity to hear the Bhagavatam and Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and nectar devotion without being disturbed by all kinds of stupid other stuff, which is what the whole material world's filled up with since time immemorial, practically. Here we're taking up at text number 55, which is still in the Chatur Shloki range. Yata mahanti bhutani bhuteshu chavacheshvanu pravishtanya pravishtani tateshu neteshvaham. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside them all, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. Purport. The gross material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, combine with the subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, to construct the bodies of this material world, and yet they are beyond these bodies as well. Any material construction is nothing but an amalgamation or combination of material elements in varied proportions. These elements exist both within and beyond the body. For example, although the sky exists in space, it also enters within the body. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, who is the cause of the material energy, lives within the material world as well as beyond it. Without his presence within the material world, the cosmic body could not develop, just as without the presence of the spirit within the physical body, the body could not develop. The entire material manifestation develops and exists because the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters it as Paramatma, or the Supersoul. The Personality of Godhead, in his all-pervading feature of Paramatma, enters every entity, from the biggest to the most minute. His existence can be realized by one who has the single qualification of submissiveness, and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization, by which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person as a man meets another man face to face. Because of his development of transcendental attachment for the Supreme Lord, a surrendered soul feels the presence of his beloved everywhere, and all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. His eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful couple, Sri Radha and Krishna, sitting on a decorated throne beneath a desire tree in the transcendental land of Vrindavan. His nose is engaged in smelling the spiritual aroma of the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, his ears are engaged in hearing messages from Vaikuntha, and his hands embrace the lotus feet of the Lord and his associates. Thus the Lord is manifested to a pure devotee from within and without. This is one of the mysteries of the devotional relationship in which a devotee of the Lord This is one of the mysteries of the devotional relationship in which a devotee and the Lord are bound by a tie of spontaneous love. To achieve this love should be the goal of life for every living being. The basic knowledge of Sankhya, of devotional Sankhya, is important because unless one has a working knowledge of the material world, it's very mysterious and difficult to understand. But essentially, there's Prakriti, which is material nature, which is inert, and then there's Purusha, or the living entity, and then above the living entity there's the Supreme Purusha, the Paramatma. And this, if you break it down to its essence, is really what's going on in the material world and not much more. So Krishna says in the Gita, Kshetrajnam chapimam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata, Kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam yatash jnanam atam mama. That jnanam means to understand this difference. This is Krishna's opinion about what knowledge is. So the various elements that are counted are all part of the same category of energy, inert matter. But the Purusha, the living entity, who's part and parcel of Krishna, the Jiva, we also call the Atma, is non-neural, non-chemical, non-temporal. It's an organizing particle. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when describing that living entity, says that he's a very tiny particle, and that his eternal constitutional position is to be a servant of the whole, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Did you want me to continue? Is that why you went back to the 56? You can scroll up to the beginning of the purport, because there's a sentence I'd like to repeat. The gross material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, combine with the subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, to construct the bodies of this material world, and yet they are beyond these bodies as well. Any material construction is nothing but an amalgamation or combination of the material elements in varied proportions. So when a person has knowledge, he or she understands that the material bodies and forms in the material world are simply various combinations and permutations of the material elements, and they're formed by mixtures of the three modes of material nature. So the real important knowledge is to understand the difference between those inert material elements and the living entity. And the big mistake is thinking oneself to be matter. And that's the fatal mistake of the living entity, through which it identifies with Prakriti and then takes on the qualities of Prakriti and actually experiences this cycle of birth and death over and over again. So this is vital knowledge that's not well known or widely known in the material world. And now we can look at the next verse. Text 56. Etavadeva jignasyam tattva jignasunatmanaha anvayavyatiri yatsyat sarvata sarvada yatsyat sarvatra sarvada. A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. Purport: those who are serious about the knowledge of the transcendental world, which is far beyond the material cosmic creation, must approach a bona fide spiritual master to learn the science, both directly and indirectly. One must learn both the means to approach the desired destination and the hindrances to such progress. The spiritual master knows how to regulate the habits of a neophyte disciple, and therefore a serious student must learn the science in all its aspects from him. There are different grades and standards of prosperity. The standard of comfort and happiness conceived by a common man engaged in material labor is the lowest grade of happiness, for it is in relationship with the body. The highest standard of such bodily comfort is achieved by a fruitive worker who by pious activities reaches the plane of heaven, or the kingdom of the creative gods with their delegated powers. but the conception of comfortable life in heaven is insignificant in comparison to the happiness enjoyed in the impersonal Brahman. In this Brahmananda, the spiritual bliss derived from impersonal Brahman is like the water in the hoofprint of a calf compared to the ocean of love of Godhead. When one develops pure love for the Lord, he derives an ocean of transcendental happiness from the association of the personality of Godhead. To qualify oneself to reach this stage of life is the highest perfection. One should try to purchase a ticket to go back home, back to Godhead. The price of such a ticket is one's intense desire for it, which is not easily awakened even if one continuously performs pious activities for thousands of years. All mundane relationships are sure to be broken in the course of time, but once one establishes a relationship with the personality of Godhead in a particular rasa, it is never to be broken, even after the annihilation of the material world. One should understand, through the transparent medium of the spiritual master, that the Supreme Lord exists everywhere in his transcendental spiritual nature, and that the living entities' relationship with the Lord are directly and indirectly existing everywhere, even in this material world. In the spiritual world, there are 5 kinds of relationships with the Supreme Lord: Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. The perverted reflections of these rasas are found in the material world. Land, home, furniture, and other inert material objects are related in Shanta, or the neutral and silent sense, whereas servants work in the Dasya relationship. The reciprocation between friends is called Sakya. The affection of a parent for a child is known as Vatsalya, and the affairs of conjugal love constitute Madhurya. These 5 relationships in the material world are distorted reflections of the original pure sentiments, which should be understood and perfected in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. In the material world, the perverted rasas bring frustration. If these rasas are re-established with Lord Krishna, the result is eternal, blissful life. From this, and the preceding 3 verses of the Caitanya Caritamrta, which have been selected from Srimad Bhagavatam, the missionary activities of Lord Chaitanya can be understood. Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses, which are summarized in the 4 verses beginning with Aham Evasameva Agre and concluding with Yatsya Sarvatra Sarvada. In the first of these verses, 53, the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, is explained. Second verse, 54, further explains that the Lord is detached from the workings of the material energy, Maya. The living entities, although parts and parcels of Lord Krishna, are prone to be controlled by the external energy. Therefore, although they are spiritual, in the material world they are encased in bodies of material energy. The eternal relationship of the living entities with the Supreme Lord is explained in that verse. The next verse, 55, instructs that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable energies, is simultaneously one with and different from the living entities and the material energy. This knowledge is called the Chinta Bheda Bheda Tattva. When an individual living entity surrenders to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he can then develop natural transcendental love for him. This surrendering process should be the primary concern of a human being. This surrendering process should be the primary concern of a human being. In the next verse, 56, it is said that a conditioned soul must ultimately approach a bona fide spiritual master and try to understand perfectly the material and spiritual worlds and his own existential position. Here the words Anvaya Vyatarika Bhyam, directly and indirectly, suggest that one must learn the process of devotional service in its 2 aspects. One must directly execute the process of devotional service and indirectly avoid the impediments to progress. So let's take a few questions from these readings that will expand the subject matter. so that we can go more deeply within it.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
I was just wondering that we read about um, um, can you not hear me? Sorry, it's resounding. Okay. The question I had was, we're reading about Shantaras in Goloka Vrindavan. So, I mean, maybe just my understanding or my assumption. Does that mean that that particular devotee does not have a human form ever? He's always as a cow or as a stick? Or this is what I had earlier read somewhere, but I can't remember where, that in Goloka Vrindavan, that, people who are gopis can, gopas can become a river, they can become a tree whenever they want to serve Krishna in that way. In that way, they can take Shantaras, but then they will also be able to take the gopa form. So my question is, when it says Shantaras, does that mean that, are there any devotees in Goloka Vrindavan where they don't have any other rasa but only Shantaras?
Well, it's an orchestrated environment. In other words, all the devotees are relishing the various rasas, if not directly as their staibhav, as the main sentiment that they have for Krishna, then they relish them through others as well, through appreciation. That, for instance, the various devotees will be observing the service of other devotees and appreciating those services. And, in that way, they're appreciating the other rasas and so forth. As far as the bodies of the living entities, in the spiritual world, as Prabhupada pointed out earlier, there's no restrictions as in the material world. The material world is full of all kinds of restricting forces, whereas in the spiritual world, everything is open and free. So there's a description in the Bhakti-Yoga when Gopal Kumar is coming into Vaikuntha. Before he enters the gates of Vaikuntha, he sees all kinds of devotees. At first he thinks they're Narayan himself, because some of them have the exact same form as Narayan, except for they don't have the Srivatsa. And then he starts to offer obeisances, and then they'll say, "Oh, no, I'm a devotee. I'm not Narayan." And then he sees a multitude of various other other kinds of entities. They have various bodies, just as you may see in this world. There are all kinds of different forms around us, 8,400,000. So he sees a multitude of various forms going in also. And Sanatana Goswami explains how these devotees are appreciating the various appearances of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his various forms. And as they appreciate those forms, they worship those forms, they also take the Sarupya Mukti, and they'll take on those forms also. And those forms are also they can also transform into other forms as well, according to their sentiments for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ijo, the end. Any other questions, or to expand the topic? Yes. Prema, Hare Krishna. Please go ahead. You just have to unmute down to the left-hand side, unless you have them locked up there. Then let everybody unmute if they need to, please. Prema, you got to unmute yourself, I think. Bottom left, there's a little microphone you have to click on. Shukeshri, how'd you come off mute? Can you do it now? You're locked. Everyone should be able to unmute themselves.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, now it's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. You're out. You're free.
Yeah. You were talking about the rasas. So our question is also if with Lord Chaitanya we can develop those rasas and in which ways we can do it. That's the question.
Yeah, there are various rasas mentioned, as you'll read in the TLC and in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that devotees have with Lord Chaitanya. There's some that are in servitorship, and others like Gadadhar Pandit, who are more in the conjugal mood. And these various, all the various rasas are there. However, there's stern warnings throughout the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Prabhupada gives about the Gauranga Nagaris, who try to cross over from Lord Chaitanya's Leela into Lord Krishna's Leela and pretend that they are in a similar kind of conjugal relationship with Lord Chaitanya as gopis are with Lord Krishna. But that's not the mood of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nonetheless, the various rasas in a different form, in the way that the devotees relate to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his mood of worshipping Radha Krishna, are all manifest there in Lord Chaitanya's Leela as well. And then, of course, those who are devotees of Lord Nityananda are in the Sakya Ras predominantly. So because you'll notice that his followers and intimate associates have that mood of being cowherders and friendly mood, friendship with Lord Nityananda.
Thank you, Maharaj.
You're welcome. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, in verse 55, it's a powerful statement that you read where Prabhupada says that his existence can be realized by one who has the single qualification of submissiveness and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization, by which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord person as a man meets another man face to face. That's a very powerful statement. And I just want to know, how is it practical? Like, how do we practice this submissiveness in this modern day? Because there are so many complications, and you being assertive is what is being appreciated even within the spiritual environments. So how do we practice this quality, Prabhu?
Well, let me ask you, I noticed you're wearing neck beads. So what are those? Where'd you get those?
I think from Mayapur, Prabhu.
No, but why are you wearing them?
To show that we are devotees of Krishna.
You wear your neck beads when? You wear
All
two
the
strands
time.
and then 3 strands. Why do you wear 3 strands? It shows that you're initiated.
Yes.
Dikshakari Bhaktakari Atma Samarpana. So Lord Chaitanya mentions this when he's speaking to Sanatana Goswami and Haridas Thakur, and he says that this surrender, especially the submissiveness, is shown when one takes a spiritual master. Not a lot of people have a spiritual master or are submissive thereafter. There's a way in which I was downtown Santa Cruz distributing one day, and I showed this guy a Bhagavad Gita, and he said, he looked at it really carefully. He goes, I want it without the commentaries. What are these purports? I don't want that. I said, why not? And he goes, I'm just going to read it directly. I don't want to hear from anybody else. That's a representative of a mood. So either it's demonstrative, like that guy was, or there's other ways in which people avoid taking a initiation. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Diksha Kali, at the time of Diksha Kali, Bhaktakari, Atma Samarpana. Samarpana means it's a demonstration of full surrender. To put yourself under the guidance of a guru for bhajana kriya and then say, I'm going to follow this. So that's one of the ways in which one is naturally submissive. So you can see highly qualified people like yourself and others, high court judges like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who is a brilliant scholar, poet, songwriter, and the best judge, on the circuit anywhere. And then he has neck beads on. What does that mean? It means when all is said and done, he's submissive to his guru. It doesn't mean submissiveness that you go around submitting to materialistic people who say, listen, you do whatever I say, and you say, yes, sir, whatever you want, I do. That's not the meaning of submissiveness. Submissiveness means to be submissive to Krishna. To be submissive to Krishna means to accept his system. So there's another way that Krishna talks about this. He says, those who follow the Pancharatric system and worship the deity according to my instructions, and Krishna gives a lot of instructions about deity worship, is a submissive person. In other words, there's rules how to worship the deity. And so you follow those rules. Who are you being submissive to? Krishna. Because not only are you worshiping him, but you're worshiping him according to the way that he set it up. These are ideas of submissiveness. Devotional life is submissiveness. Why do you follow the four regulative principles? You're a submissive person. You could go do anything you want. You have senses. You have willfulness. You can use it to go out and do whatever you feel like at any time. And a lot of people do. Not with a great effect afterwards, or a great consequence, I should say. So your life is submissive. Follow four regulative principles. Why do you chant at least 16 rounds every day? So your guru asked you to, and the Shastra asked you to, so you're submissive. And when it comes down to making a decision about something, you decide based on what's most pleasing to Krishna, don't you? Say yes.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, that's a life of submissiveness. And so then Krishna says, Ekali, Bhaktakari, Atmasam. He says, those who are submissive like this and accept a guru, follow the regulator, he says, I accept those people to be the same as myself. They're in the same category. So this is the process of submissiveness means to follow the parampara. Tat tat karma pravartana. That's submissive.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. We have a couple from Facebook right here. How do you develop submissiveness? I hope that helped, Sona. We just answered it. Shringara Ras, Devi Dasi, Haribo. I have a question about the current protests going on across the whole material world. How do we understand these protests in a spiritual context? The way we understand them is that the living entities are smart, especially as human beings, and they have the impetus to ask questions. The Vedanta Sutra says, Tato Brahma Jignasa. Now's the time to ask bigger questions, find out what's holding you back and so forth. So there's this natural impetus within human beings to figure out things like justice and what's mercy, what's compassion, what's not. Animals don't have that type of reasoning capability. So that's why you don't see a bunch of orangutans walking down through the Washington, D.C. area holding signs, because they don't have that reasoning capacity. So humans have that kind of sense. When you become a human being, you get a human form, you have this kind of sense that there should be more than this. Animals just try to get a little more food. They hide a few nuts in the ground, or they build a nest and they try to get what they can from nature according to what they've been given. But human beings have this reasoning power where they start thinking, like, why don't we fly to the moon, or go into space and see what's there? It doesn't have a lot of practical purpose except to fulfill this inquiring propensity. And human beings notice it when they feel like their freedoms are being curtailed. And this is going on since time immemorial. You can look at all different kinds of systems in the world that are presented, to organize human society in one way or another. There's always some kind of way that people end up getting subjected to tyranny and so forth. And human beings figure it out and they don't like it. So then, as far as demonstrating and protesting stuff, that's what we do too. We go out into the public and, there's a lot of names you can chant. Right now, people are chanting George Floyd. George Floyd, George Floyd, George Floyd, George Floyd. And, their impetus is to express freedom and talk about compassion, and we should be equal to everybody, which is true. But then if you take it a step further and say, well, how would an individual get to that point of freedom, and how would society get to that point of freedom? Then if you think it out a little bit more, my proposal would be that you would come to join Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, because that's providing freedom for all living entities. For instance, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta used to point out that people would clamor for freedom for human beings, and then, what about the animals? So right now we have racism. So what about speciesism? Why are the various species being mistreated? Some of them get to sleep in the house, and the other ones get to go to the slaughterhouse. And so to really protest, you should dedicate your life to the process of Krishna consciousness, which achieves a lot of those ends immediately. I mean, for one, just as a very easily connected thought, devotees are nonviolent, Prabhupada points out, naturally nonviolent, because that's included in being a devotee of Lord Krishna. And I like this saying. I saw it on a lamppost this morning when I was on my early morning walk. It said, white silence equals violence. And Prabhupada says, in essence, Vaishnav silence equals violence. His point is, if Vaishnavas don't speak up and tell people that there's a difference between the body and the self, there's a process for liberation and so forth, and even there's ways to organize society that are naturally, they're mandated by Krishna actually in the Gita, and they're naturally created by Krishna, that can help organize human society in various ways. So these are topics that devotees bring up and they demonstrate about. We have peaceful demonstrations where we go out and we chant names, we hold up signs, we say, do this. So we would like to see the same numbers of people going through Washington, D.C. and through Frankfurt and San Francisco across the bridge. Wouldn't it be nice all in one day? Harinam Sankirtan's going with millions of people around the world, demanding that we're not going to accept the standard of material life anymore. We demand from our senses, which have been holding us in tyranny for many, many lifetimes, to free us and allow us to serve Krishna. And, we demand a higher purpose for society, organizing around the principle of letting everybody understand what the true purpose of life is. So those are, a few ideas, Shringara Rasa. I hope that helps. Alexander and Valentina said, the price of such a ticket is one's intense desire for it, which is not easily awakened, even if one continuously performs pious activities for thousands of lives. So this is from a verse, it's verbatim from a verse by Rupa Goswami, in which he says, Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitomati kritanyadi kritopi labhyate tataloyam api mulyam ekalam janmakoti sukritirna labhyate. So Rupa Goswami says that the Krishna bhakti ras bhavitomati, the highest thing that you can get is bhakti ras. And then he says the price to get it is laulyam, or intensity of desire or greed. to have it. And then he says, you can't get it from performing pious activities. It's not an ordinary thing. And then he says, if it's available somewhere, you should run to get it. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. You should go to get it as soon as possible. And finally, we have a Tulya Harinam, who says, as an aspiring devotee and in the process of Krishna consciousness, what should be our mood of servitorship? Is it Dasya Ras always? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in the Navadip Mahatmya that when you perform Dasya Ras, the mood of Dasya Ras for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then naturally you'll develop your relationship with Radha and Krishna. And that will come out naturally by performing Dasya Ras, which means serve Lord Chaitanya's movement, follow in the footsteps of the Goswamis, Mahaprabhu's disciples. They did practical seva and they also did internal work, meaning they listened very carefully to the Bhagavatam amongst themselves, and they also built temples, wrote books, and distributed them and so forth. So that's the mood of Dasya Ras to Lord Chaitanya. And Prabodhananda Saraswati also says, Yata Yata Gora Padara Vinde, that if you serve Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet, then naturally love for Radha and Krishna will awaken in your heart. That's the benediction of worshiping Lord Chaitanya. Tirtaspadam Shiva Virinchi Nutam Sharanyam Yartiham Pranatapala Pabhabipotam. So if you worship Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet, you get the culmination of worshiping all the holy places, because they're all present there. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in that special mood. And
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes.
Please accept my humble obeisances. I have a question about not related topic, but was reading. I'm reading a Bhagavatam, and in Bhagavatam, I don't know which canto, but I think Nimi Raja King Nimi. The Devatas has so much power, which I didn't know that they could make the Nimi king alive, and even though they are there in the spiritual world to enjoy. And I was wondering I have a question, how come they have so much power even though they are there to enjoy? And are they spiritually, even though they are spiritually advanced, but they are there to enjoy the world in Swarga? Would you explain, please?
I didn't quite hear the first part of your question because it broke up a little bit. I thought you were talking about King Nimi.
Yes. So King, when Nimi was dead, and then Devtas, Rishi asked Devtas that can you make him alive? And Devtas has power, that much power that they could have done it, but Nimi didn't want. So my question is, Devtas are there to enjoy, and how come we think Devtas are there just for enjoyment? I didn't know that God Lord gave them that much power that they could make person alive, and even though they are there to enjoy. So
Well,
if you can.
first of all, those who have, human beings, we're barely aware of the ways in which material nature works. As Patanjali explains in the last third of the Yoga Sutras, he describes the technology behind all of the mystic yogic powers. For instance, a yogi can vacate his body and enter into somebody else's body. These seem like fantastical performances, but actually they have to do with the way that Prakriti works. And when somebody understands how Prakriti works, what seems fantastical to us is actually as simple, Prabhupada says, walking to the grocery store for others. So those in higher planets, like on Siddha Loka, they have all kinds of mystical potencies, and including the power to fly and so forth, which we don't see a lot here. It's done mechanically and so forth. But if you think about it, technology I don't know how this thing works either. I mean, some of you maybe have a few theories about how it works, but it's pretty mystical. I mean, the material nature is, it can be manipulated in many different ways. So bringing somebody back into their body is not such an elevated technology that somebody, a yogi or a demigod or somebody, can't do it. And the basic principle in the material world in general, not just in the heavenly planets, is that everyone wants to enjoy. There's hellish planets, there's middle planets, there's upper planets, and generally people come into the material world with a spirit of enjoyment, and that's why they keep looking for something and not getting it. But muktanam apisidhanam narayana parayana. There are different kinds of muktas who have given up the idea of enjoying the material world, and they have a different purpose, which is to become liberated and go back to Godhead.
So, Mike,
Yes?
can I ask? Just checking my understanding, does that mean that they must have done something? They are something spiritually they are doing. They are not there to enjoy.
Who are you talking about?
Devas, the one same Devtas, the one who are there in.
Devata, those who come to the higher planetary systems are very, very pious in the mode of goodness. So we move up and down in the various stratums of the material world according to our karma. So Krishna warns Arjuna about this in the Bhagavad Gita when he says that no matter how much piety, good karma you develop in the material world, you're going to use it up and you're going to fall back down again. So he said, don't be concerned with these things, moving up and down. Then, of course, when you get into the very higher planetary systems around Brahmaloka, Prabhupada describes it's almost identical to the spiritual world because the atmosphere is so rarefied. Those who live with Brahma on Brahmaloka. And there are many great sages that live on those upper planetary systems as well. If you're going to be in the material world, that's a place where sages like. But actually, Bhagavatam says that the best place to be is on earth. Because if you look at the universe, it's like a big building, and the exit door is on earth. From the tirthas like Vrindavan, Mathura, that's how you get out of the material world. So even these devas, they don't have it as good as we do as human beings. You should take note of this because we got a short little life, and don't complain about it because you can do a lot within this short life. It's actually kind of hellish to hang around in the heavenly planets for eons because the material world's hellish, even in the heavenly planets, because it's not connected with Krishna directly. And so demigods, even if they do become enlightened, they have to live out their lifespan there, come down to earth, then from here perform devotional service through which they can go back home, back to Godhead. So we're already here. Better take advantage of it and take the process of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and go back to Godhead.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Sorry, Prabhuji.
No, go
The
ahead.
question.
Oh, yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavad Pranam. As we read today, text 56, can you please explain more what is the directly and indirectly inquire? A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly about it.
Yes. Yes. Well, at the end of this purport, Prabhupada answers that question. He says, at the end of the purport, here the words Anvaya Vyatareka Bhyam directly and indirectly suggest that one must learn the process of devotional service in its two aspects. One must directly execute the process of devotional service and indirectly avoid the impediments to progress. So those two things are mentioned in this purport, but Jiva Goswami says more about it in the Bhagavatam commentary. What are the verse numbers for this? Bhagavatam 2 what?
9.
Okay, 2956.
I think 34 onwards.
Huh?
34. 34 like that.
Should be 36. This one should be 36.
Yeah, 30, 34, 35, 36 like that, the Chaturthi.
You will get. Yes, you will get. Okay, 2936. This Yet Sarvata Sarvata is also explained in the purport. Yes, here we are. This is near the, well, it's in the middle. It's a long purport, so good luck finding it. But it starts off with Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhupada therefore comments on the words Sarvatra Sarvada in the sense that the principles of Bhakti-Yoga or devotional service to the Lord are apt in all circumstances. That is, Bhakti-Yoga is recommended in all the revealed scriptures. It is performed by all authorities, and it is important in all places. It is useful in all causes and effects, etc. As far as the revealed scriptures are concerned, he quotes from the Skanda Purana on topics of Brahma and Narada as follows. Sangsare smin Maha-Baho janma mrityu samakule pujanam vasudevasya tarakam vadibhismritam. In the material world, which is full of darkness and dangers, combined with birth and death, and full of different anxieties, the only way to get out of the great entanglement is to accept loving transcendental devotional service to Lord Vasudeva. This is accepted by all classes of philosophers. So that's an extended answer to the question of what is Yat Sarvata, Sarvata, both directly and indirectly. Did that help you?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you.
Okay, now you know where to look it up too. It's right there in the commentary. It's a long purport worth reading again and again. Call in to the office and tell them you won't be in for a few months because you're studying the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam with 21 pundits at home. Shrisha says, okay, yes, you just asked that. Okay, then Hare Krishna. This is from Devavrata. Forgive me for this question being a bit off topic, but yesterday I heard, if I heard properly, you mentioned that Raghunath Das Goswami has an entire book about Anartha Nivritti and his subtleties. Yeah, Manashiksha. Urmila Mataji wrote a translation of that commentary. Manashiksha, it's available. And Sri Kumar is demanding Harinam. He demands Harinam, and he's ready to march for it. Is that correct, Sri Kumar Prabhu? Let's go. You're ready. This is the real revolution. Sukeshri, wow, it's an amazing idea. Harinam Sankirtan around the world protests against inequality of material existence, of Maya consciousness creates inequality. We're against that. We want Krishna consciousness, not Maya consciousness. And if you superficially so-called solve the problem, it's going to pop right back again because the modes of nature just keep churning. I mean, I grew up in the 60s. We demanded the same thing back then. And all the hippies got into drugs and forgot everything. And here we are back again. It's the material world's always churning in that way. So you have to, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is transcendental. Not only that, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the revolutionary. And if you follow him and talk about him and distribute books about him and so forth, it's the only thing that's really effective in Kali Yuga. Everybody wants these things, but it doesn't mean you're going to get them unless you have some knowledge. The sincerity.
Change her name, but she does not.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, Prabhu.
Oh, okay. Dinanath Prabhu says, beginning of the purport, Srila Prabhupada lists 8 material elements composing material body. which is meant to keep us in illusion. However, one particular element from these 8, which is intelligence, is actually capable to pull us out. Could you please kindly comment on this, and also how some practical tips on how we can develop a habit of taking shelter of the intelligence? Thank you very much. Well, in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna says, when you purify your intelligence, then your intelligence can act as one of your Shiksha gurus, because it becomes transcendentalized. But when the intelligence, Prabhupada writes in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, becomes infiltrated by kama, or the Rajaguna, then it starts inventing ways to enjoy the material world. Like you look around and, there's all these amazing things that human beings build, but they're just to try to enjoy the senses more, so they're really for naught, ultimately. So Krishna says at the end of the 3rd chapter of the Gita, Evam buddhi param budva samstubbed yatmanam jahishatra Maha-Baho kama Rupam Durasadam. He says through the process of discrimination and through the practice of Bhakti-Yoga, you should develop your intelligence so that it will direct you properly. Purified intelligence. And just a couple more. Lakshmi Van Prabhu says, great rishis in topmost planets are thinking of Krishna. Is this not enough to promote them to Goloka? Why do they have to return to earth? Is it not their remembrance of Krishna devotional service powerfully purifying? It is, but just like Gopal Kumar, he went to all these higher planetary systems and associated with various great sages and so forth. But in order to make it back to Goloka, he didn't go straight from the heavenly planets. He came to Gokula Vrindavan and performed Sankirtan. So that's the gateway to going back into the spiritual world is through Harinam Sankirtan from Gokula Vrindavan, or Navadvip, which is non-different from Vrindavan. And speaking of Navadvip, Bhaktivinoda Thakur spent his time in Navadvip. He built his home there, and he envisioned the development of the Sankirtan movement. He saw that people from all over the world could join under the banner of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And working for that as a spiritual revolutionary, he wrote 100 books. He also taught many people the process of chanting Hare Krishna, all the while working, maintaining a family, 11 kids. And by his spiritual power, he was able to inculcate the process of devotional service for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the vision of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world into his exalted son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then, of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had a huge success with the Gaudiya Math in India and had a desire to see it spread all over the world. Some tried in various places, were not successful, but by Krishna's arrangement, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada became successful at bringing that spirit of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and of his Guru Maharaj to the shores of America. And Prabhupada emphasized how much we should take shelter of the Guru Parampara and their mood and try to fulfill their desires. Acharyopasanam means to worship the acharyas. And if we worship the acharyas by following their mood, and their mood is spread the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Very specifically, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta emphasized book distribution. He told it to his disciple, Abhay Charanaravinda, at Radhakund, later to become His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, that he was a little discouraged with building all kinds of temples here, there, and everywhere. Even the flagship temple, the Bug Bazaar in Calcutta, he found that his devotees, they took a different mood and they were fighting over it. like who gets which room, who's in a higher caste. And the preaching mood became tainted rather, with the enjoying spirit. And he was disgusted with it. And he said to his disciple, Bhaicharna, if you ever get money, print books. So Prabhupada said, I took this up from his mouth, that he liked books very much. And he did. He had the printing press on the altar, same level with the deities, and he as a thing of worship for the Rag Marg, for spreading Krishna consciousness to people all over the world. And this was all coming from the vision and desire of Bhaktivinoda Thakur as it's passed down through disciplic succession. So every year at ISKCON of Silicon Valley, since here's the first poster. I have it on my wall. That was our first monthly Sankirtan festival to celebrate Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Divine Disappearance Day. Can you see it?
Haribol.
You see it?
Yes.
It was in 2007.
Yes.
Who said that? Is that Hansapriya?
Yes, Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
There. So 2007, we took the shelter of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Divine Disappearance Day, and we set a big goal, distribute a lot of books, and it was a really big goal for us at the time, which was probably like 100 books or something like that. And somebody complained and said, they wrote me a letter. I wish I still had an email and said, I think you're pushing us a little too hard. This is this goal. I mean, it's nice to, go for it and everything like that, but we should be reasonable. You're pushing too hard. And I got fired up. I wrote an article. I published it on Dandavat's The Power of Thinking Big or something like that. And somehow or other, we all came together and we not just reached the goal, but we smashed it. We surprised ourselves when we realized that there was something special from Bhaktivinoda Thakur that we were getting by trying to please him. And every single year since 2007, if I'm not incorrect, it's 2020 now. Is that correct? This lockdown has me a little disoriented. That's been 13 or 14 years we've been doing this and depending on Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and every single time, every year, we've increased. The point of going from just sending a few $100s to BBT to last year, sending over $600,000 to BBT, receipts for sets of books being sold, Bhagavad Gitas in the tens of thousands being sold from our tiny, tiny little community here, nestled in Silicon Valley, hidden away, tucked away on Latham Avenue, and we have a revolution going on because of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Srila Prabhupada's request. The power is in their words.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.